23rd of January 2009, in the city Bratsk in Russia, a group of snowboarders made a horrific discovery. They saw a leg that belonged to a young female and was sticking out of snow on Soldatskaya mountain. And when the investigators arrived right there, it became pretty clear that this was a crime scene. The deceased female was very young, around 16 or 17 years old. Her head was shaven and she was undressed, and her body was covered with dozens of bruises. And what was even more chilling, the victim's hands were tied behind her back. At first, it was unclear what was the actual cause of death, but when the expertise results arrived, it became clear that this case is even more sinister than it looks. It turned out that the victim just froze to death. Detectives were also able to figure out who it was. The body belonged to 15-year-old Nastya Blekhina, who studied in school number 20 of city Bratsk, which is an average town in eastern part of Siberia. Soldatskaya mountain, where the body was found, is located not too far from Bratsk, and this place has a bad reputation among locals. A few years before that, there were bodies of murdered prostitutes found, and there were also old abandoned mines near that same mountain. But if Nastya was attacked right there, what was she doing there? Or was it possible that someone took her there? Police had to answer all of these questions to solve the case. Detectives started questioning Nastya's classmates to find out who were her friends or acquaintances. They were also able to find out that since she was 14 years old, she dated 20-year-old Andrei Orekhov, and both of them were hanging out with a sketchy group of people. All of the members of the group were aged from 14 to 20 years old, and most of them didn't even know each other's names. They used nicknames like Demon, Castrate, The Fish, and etc. Nastya's boyfriend's nickname was The Oracle. She also didn't live with her mother at that time. She was either hanging in the apartment when her group of friends were hanging out or elsewhere. Her mother, who apparently had some psychiatric issues at the time, just thought that Nastya lived with her grandmother, and her grandmother thought that Nastya lived with her mother. Despite the fact that Nastya was often hanging out with her group of so-called friends, she was considered to be a loner and was often acting detached from everyone in school. After the police questioned all of the Nastya's classmates, someone anonymously called them. We are not sure what information was given to the police, but soon Nastya's so-called friends, who she hanged with, were arrested. Because some of the members of this group were around 14 years old, it wasn't too hard for detectives to make them talk. So a picture of what happened began to emerge. 19-year-old Dmitry Leshov, nicknamed Demon, was the unofficial leader of this group. They were hanging out mostly in his apartment that he inherited some time ago. Everyone was smoking, drinking, and doing drugs there. 18-year-old Nadezhda Gaponik was another leader in that group and was in a way Demon's right hand. Nastya's boyfriend Andrei was also in this group, and he always wanted to be acknowledged by Demon and wanted to get his respect. So at some point, Dmitry, for no apparent reason, thought that Nastya stole his phone and bank cards when she was at his home. On the next day, he met Nastya when she left her apartment and told her to get in the taxi with him. He took Nastya to the apartment building where her boyfriend Andrei lived. There were already 6 people waiting for them. Some of them Nastya saw for the first time, and some she considered to be her friends. When they arrived, Demon asked Nadezhda Gaponik, who everyone called Catastrophe, to come up with a punishment for Nastya. First thing that Gaponik came up with was to shave Nastya's head. Then Dmitry ordered to undress Nastya, and this was just the beginning of a 4-day torture that Nastya endured. She was sexually assaulted, and this was first proposed by Gaponik too. At some point, everyone even started using a shovel handle to assault Nastya. She endured everything, trying to be as silent as possible. The group was coming up with more and more horrific way to torture her. They made Nastya drink body liquids, and they were putting out cigarette butts on her skin. The youngest child who took part in this torture was only 14 years old. Some of the participants were hesitating if they should do things they actually did to Nastya. But when they did hesitate, they were threatened to take Nastya's place as victims. In between all of the torture, Nastya was furiously beaten by everyone, and all of this was filmed on mobile phones. At some point, the group took Nastya to the country house that belonged to one of them, and she was locked in the basement of that house. The torture continued there. She was beaten with everything they found. Sexual assaults were filmed, and some of the underage children were doing this to Nastya too. The fact that Dmitry accused Nastya of stealing was also a lie, as at some point he was able to find bank cards as he thought Nastya stole. After 4 days of horrific torture, everyone who took part in it realized that if they let Nastya go, she will go to police, and each one of the 7 people who took part in it will end up in jail. Leshov himself decided what he will do to Nastya. He only told what he was planning to do to Andrei Orechov, who was Nastya's ex-boyfriend, and to 15-year-old nicknamed Castrate. This teenager also assaulted Nastya and was horrified if she will go to police, and he was ready to do anything to avoid this. They used a taxi to take Nastya to Soldatskaya mountain. She was too afraid to say something to the taxi driver, and he didn't notice anything suspicious, despite the fact that Nastya was shaved and heavily beaten. When they arrived at the mountain, Leshov took out a knife and told Nastya to take off her jacket and a bit later her boots, jeans, and sweater. The temperature outside was minus 40 degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit. Nastya was ordered to walk to the top of the mountain. Leshov later told that it was so cold outside that his feet were freezing even in his winter boots, so it's hard to imagine what Nastya endured while being fully naked. In her last steps, Nastya was barely walking because her feet almost froze. At the top of the mountain, Leshov, Orechov, and Castrate ordered her to lie on the ground. She curled up, but still didn't scream. Nastya was just quietly repeating, "Please don't kill me." Castrate had a bottle of water with him, and he gave it to Leshov and Orechov. They poured water on Nastya and tied her legs and hands behind her back. After it, they put her in a little hole in the snow and covered her with more snow. While they were burying her, Nastya still repeated, "Please don't kill me." After it, all of them just left Nastya there to slowly die while being buried in the snow, covered with freezing water. During the interrogation, Castrate didn't show any remorse, and he was eagerly showing photographs of Nastya he made during the torture to police officers. As it turned out, some of the girls who were at Leshkov's apartment while Nastya was tortured there told about it to their friends, and one of these friends apparently was the anonymous caller. All of the murder and torture participants were evaluated by psychiatrists. All of them were considered mentally sane. But one of them, Nadezhda Gaponik, wasn't arrested, and she was also nowhere to be found. Even at the time when the trial started, police still didn't arrest Gaponik, so at the time it was pretty obvious that she probably fled the city and is hiding somewhere in Russia. But because she played one of the key roles in torturing Nastya, police really wanted to arrest her. Demon, or Dmitry Leshov, was sentenced to 25 years in prison for murder and involvement of underage in committing a felony. He's serving his sentence in high-regime prison. Even during the trial, he didn't show any remorse and was telling that he rightfully punished Nastya for stealing. Andrei Orechov was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Ilya Ryabchik, or Castrate, was sentenced to only 6 years in prison, as he was only 15 years old at the moment of the murder. Other underage defendants were sentenced to 4, 10, and 6 years in prison. Nadezhda Gaponik was still not arrested. She was hiding for almost 7 years using a fake name. So she had to do any job and allegedly even had to work as a prostitute because she couldn't use her documents as she was on the federal search list in Russia. And when she finally, as she said, found her true love and decent job, Nadezhda Gaponik, or Catastrophe, was caught. Because Gaponik didn't take part in actual murder of Nastya, she was sentenced to only 10 years in prison. And after the sentence, she was really horrified because she knew what would happen to her in prison when her cellmates will find out why she was jailed. Friends, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like or write a comment, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.